Hi, I'm Roxy, and today we're going to look at an anti-image piracy technology called Yuify. I'll tell you what it is, how it works, and because I'll never lie to you, I'll also point out some glaringly bad issues with it. While I talk, just to have something to look at, I'll play some time-lapse footage from my latest painting, and we'll also attempt to use that artwork to demo the Yuified tech at the end. So Wacom have developed this new technology called Yuify. It comes from a Japanese word yui, which represents a link. And in this case, that link refers to the artist being linked to their work. Wacom are basically saying that with Yuify, you can claim authorship of your work and safeguard your digital creations. Now, obviously, in our current climate of big tech stealing artists' work to train their generative AI models, and of course the retaliatory class action lawsuit that's gaining ground, I think we all prick up our ears when we hear there's a way to tag our work as our own, especially if it means, not having to put an ugly watermark on it. And this is what Yuify's purpose is. That, and also to give you an easy and definitive way to establish licensing terms for each particular artwork that you run through Yuify. So my first question was, do you need a Wacom to use Yuify? Because I have an old Wacom, but I haven't used it in years. My current tablet is actually a Huion. Fortunately, the answer to that is no, you don't need a Wacom tablet. You do need a Wacom account, but that's free, and you also need a copy of an art software that contains the Yuified tech. So at present, Yuified technology has been implemented into Photoshop CC, Clip Studio Paint, and Rebelle by Escape Motions. And we'll look at those near the end of the video. The next question is, how does it work? So in a nutshell, Yuify adds what is called a micro mark to key areas of your artwork, and this mark contains a scannable digital ID. This digital ID is linked to a record that is stored on the blockchain. The record contains the artist's name and the licensing terms that they've set up for that particular artwork. So in theory, a person wanting to use a painting that they found on the internet runs it through Yuifinder, which is the search engine for images that have these micro marks. And if the painting is listed in Yuifinder, the searcher can see who painted it, what their licensing terms are, and even contact the artist via the Yuify platform to make a deal. Now, most of that sounds cool, obviously, but I'm sure when I said that the digital ID relates to a record on the blockchain, some of you got NFT vibes and your buttholes clenched angrily, and probably for good reason. So that brings us to our first major issue that I want to highlight, which is that it's running on the blockchain. If you have no idea what the blockchain is, I can explain it very simply as an online digital ledger of records and transactions. And this ledger is decentralized, meaning it's not stored in one place or controlled by one company. Instead, there are many instances of it that are spread out across the web. And when a new record is added, when a new block is added to the chain, all these instances of the ledger get an update. And it's for this reason that a record stored on the blockchain is more secure and less prone to tampering. And this is obviously why Wacom have chosen to store these records on the blockchain, as opposed to, for example, on their own web server, where it could be internally tampered with or externally hacked. The problem is that creating and verifying records or adding blocks to the chain uses a lot of computational power and electricity. And then we get into the realm of greenhouse emissions and carbon footprints and all that jazz. Some of you care about that stuff, some of you don't. Most of you probably have some nuanced opinions. My opinion is that if we can easily minimize damage to the environment, we definitely should. And with blockchain, there is the potential for that. there isn't just one blockchain. There's a few different blockchains, and some of them don't use nearly as much electricity as others. For example, the Polygon and Solana blockchains are a lot more energy efficient than, say, the Bitcoin or Ethereum blockchains. And the problem is that Wacom aren't saying which blockchain they're using. They don't disclose this on their site, and so I asked Wacom support. They didn't know, and said that they'd send the question on to the relevant department and get back to me. After a few days without hearing anything, I figured they weren't going to tell me, but then while I was editing the video, they surprised me with an email, which we'll read together. Dear Roxanne, thank you for your patience during this process. Yuify currently uses an internally hosted blockchain. In the long term, the plan is to migrate to a public blockchain. We are not sharing any names, but I would like to mention that it is not a proof of work chain, which means it is low energy consumption. So they're saying that they won't use a proof of work blockchain. And fortunately, that rules out Bitcoin. It doesn't rule out Ethereum, though. Ethereum is a proof of stake, and it does use a lot less energy than Bitcoin, but it's not nearly as efficient as Polygon or Solana. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. The second issue is what happens when somebody takes your work and runs it through Yuify without you knowing it. That would make them the owner, at least according to Yuifinder, and any potential customer who searches on Yuifinder and wants to use it ends up paying the thief licensing fees that should have gone to you. And I can tell you now that this will happen. It happened with NFTs en masse. Tech bros were stealing art like it was going out of fashion and minting them as their own NFTs and then selling them for Ethereum. At one point, it was so rife that, was it DeviantArt? Someone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it was DeviantArt. They implemented a checker that would scan NFT markets to see if your work was being sold as NFTs without your knowledge. I couldn't find it when I looked earlier, but I think that's because they eventually paywalled that feature. But the point is that this will happen with Yuify too because, well, scaly people exist. And Wacom obviously somewhat anticipates this because tucked away in their terms of use, they outline the procedure to do a takedown request. Okay, let's read this together. Intellectual property infringement notification procedure. Wacom respects third-party intellectual property rights. If you believe that your intellectual property rights have been infringed, please proceed as follows. For takedown requests, please send notices to Wacom in accordance with the procedures available on the Yuify website. I looked on the Yuify website, I couldn't find any procedures. Maybe I'm not looking right, or maybe it doesn't exist, or if it does, it's tucked away somewhere difficult to find. But anyway, alternatively, you can contact Wacom at the following email address. Wacom may take down any content in response to takedown notices and or other intellectual property infringement claims. Infringement notice. Upon receipt of an infringement notice, Wacom will reach out to the user who allegedly infringes the notifier's rights and ask said user for a statement on the allegations. Subsequently, Wacom will inform the notifier and the user about our decision, how we will react on the infringement notice. Without prejudice to any other rights, claims or remedies that Wacom may have under this agreement or otherwise at law or in equity, it is Wacom's policy to disable or terminate the accounts of users who are repeat infringers. So they'll obviously take it down if you can prove it's yours, but what they won't do anything about is the licensing deals and money that has already exchanged hands regarding that particular artwork. And we know this because, let's just scroll up to 2.5.1, interactions with other users. This is obviously on the Yuify platform where the licensing deals take place. You are solely responsible for your interactions and communications with other users of the Yuify services. And it says here, Wacom is not a party to and will have no liability or responsibility to you or to any third party in connection with any license which you obtain or grant in connection with a resource. So that's our issue number 2. Scaly people are going to steal artists' work and try to profit off of it. That's a given. The third issue is, what if tech bros run their AI slop through Yuify? does that allow them to actually license their content? Because you can't legally copyright AI-generated images in, well, definitely not the US, Canada, Japan, Australia, South Korea, and in the rest of the world, the laws are a little bit ambiguous. For the most part, probably not. Weirdly, from what I've read, it sounds like in the UK, the copyright belongs to the programmer, not the end user. But that's just me trying to make sense of legalese. So if I'm wrong about the UK interpretation, correct me in the comments. But typically, you can't copyright AI generated slop. So my question is, can these prompt monkeys use Yuify to legitimize their AI slop? If Wacom's intentions are for actual artists to take ownership of their work, and I like to believe it is, then shouldn't Wacom straight off the bat just disallow AI art on the Yuify platform? I think it should, but they haven't. I've read through the usage terms and I couldn't find anything that would prevent AI from being licensed through Yuify, and this concerns me a lot. Given that Wacom tablets are made for real artists, you'd think they would honor their target market by taking a strong anti-AI stance, but they've been disappointingly wishy-washy. You may remember a recent debacle where Wacom put out an advert containing an artwork that turned out to be AI generated, and they blamed it on the stock site that they purchased it from. Of course, the bigger question here is, why didn't they commission one of their many artist customers to actually use a Wacom product and create the graphic for the advert, instead of randomly picking a stock art and implying it was created with a Wacom? That's false advertising any way you look at it. And in this case, it bit them in the bum when it turned out to be AI generated art on top of everything. Then on top of that, there's the Wacom Career Days presentation on Yuify, where Wacom's lead software architect demos the technology using what is clearly an AI-generated image. My brain immediately flagged that as AI, but I ran it through Hive as well, just to make sure I wasn't being paranoid. And Hive is pretty certain as well. So again, the majority of Wacom's customers are actual artists. Why not ask one of them for permission to use an artwork for the demo instead of using generated AI slop? So I just really don't like how Wacom seem to be tolerating generative AI despite it being detrimental to the livelihoods of the actual target market. And that brings me to my fourth and final issue for now, and that is, will Wacom use my images that I run through Yuify to train some sort of AI system of their own? Now, you might think that's an absurd question, and while I don't think that Wacom is interested in the AI space, we didn't think that Adobe and Corel would get in bed with AI either, and yet here we sit with Adobe Firefly and Corel's Vision FX AI plugin. Sometimes these companies really don't mind doing a 180 on their target market. So, regrettably, I don't think it's an absurd question. Wacom have laid out some points in their terms and conditions about what they will use your art for, which seems above board and reasonable, but I think if they want artists to embrace this tech, they need to state clearly what they won't do with our art too. So, to summarize my issues with Yuify, number one, we don't know what blockchain Yuify is using. I'm tempted to cross this off the list because them mentioning low energy consumption in my email leads me to believe it's going to be one of the better blockchains, but it could still turn out to be Ethereum, which, while much better than Bitcoin, still isn't wonderful. So we have to wait and see for that one. Number two, is this going to create more work for artists having to fight against all the scaly people that steal our art and run it through Yuify as their own? I think it will, and sadly I don't know what the solution is to that problem. Number three, will this tech be used to legitimize AI slop that's currently not copyrightable? Here, I think Wacom needs to take a stand and just ban AI from being Yuified. That would instantly solve that issue. And number four, will Wacom themselves use our art to train an AI system? Again, I don't think so, but I'd love for Wacom to be very clear about that in their terms and conditions. So in conclusion about the tech itself, what do we do about it? I don't know, because, the aforementioned issues, I'm not particularly optimistic about the technology, but I don't think it's intrinsically bad. I think the intentions behind it are good, and if not abused, it could be useful. Could be very useful even. With regards to the companies that have implemented it, well, we know Adobe loves AI and don't give a damn about their users, but Clip Studio Paint and Escape Motions, who own Rebelle, they're great companies who, by all their actions so far, really do care about artists. I own both Clip Studio Paint 3 and Rebelle Pro 7, and I love them both. I can see why both of these companies would think Yuify would be useful for their customers, and I'm not going to fault them on that. Yuify at least seems to be intentionally good, although deeply flawed and open to abuse. It's early days though, so we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I do read them all. But now before I end the video, I want to run this art on the left through Yuify so I can at least properly demo it. I'm not sure how much of it I can show you though, because as I understand it, it's in beta and only available for the US and part of Europe. Not for us people down in Africa wearing our grass skirts because we're too busy giraffe racing for such affairs. But I'll take you as far as I can. Now, I don't rent software, so I can't show you Photoshop CC. But as mentioned, I do own Clip Studio Paint and Rebelle. But I actually couldn't find the Yuify setting in Clip Studio Paint. According to the Wacom screenshot, I should find it here just above print settings. We should have Yuify, but if I go to my Clip Studio Paint, I don't have that, and this is the latest Clip Studio Paint 3. So what I suspect is that Yuify might only be available on the Clip Studio Paint X version. If you have that version, please check for us and let us know in the comments. I only have the Pro version, and it doesn't seem like I have that option. I can show you Rebelle though. In Rebelle, you hit File, go down to Yuify, and the first thing you want to do is connect your Rebelle to Yuify. So you click that button and it opens up the Yuify site. I've already connected my Rebelle. Once you've done that and you have the image you want to Yuify, you hit File, Yuify, Export Secured Image. A window pops up asking you to, for whatever reason, describe the image. We hope that this is not for AI training purposes. And then you navigate to where you want to save your micro-marked image. Once I saved the image, this prompt popped up asking me to set a country. I'm not a liar, so I chose South Africa. And when I did that, it popped up saying, "I'm sorry, please go back to playing with your zebras. This is only for proper countries." So sadly, that's as far as I can take you. When they open up the beta to South Africa, I guess I'll do a proper demo for you. But thank you to my patrons. Thank you for watching. Much obliged if you leave a like and subscribe. Until the next one, God bless.